Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Find Your Voice. If you're new to this podcast, welcome along. My name's Andy Hesse, I'm a consultant and coach, and I'm talking to people who have found their voice in various different ways. We've spoken to Thibaut Grammett, author of The Money Bible, and we've also spoken to Denise Mulcrone, who is an executive coach. Today we're back with the writers, and not just a writer, but a film producer and a film director as well. Welcome to the podcast, Dean Drinkell. So Dean, thank you very much for joining us today. How are you?
Not so bad, Andy. It is Thursday afternoon down here in southern England. It's very muggy. So, I'm trying to get through the day. But it's good because I'm actually writing, I'll say this out here, I'm actually writing, I'm going to call it a TV series for the sake of this call because where we are in the process, a TV series. So I've been working on that this week and today I've been writing some episodes. So I'm actually in a good place.
Very, very exciting. Well, we'll come on to talking about film and TV in a bit. So I want to kind of go back just a couple of years because obviously, being a young whippersnapper that
exactly.
You are. What were you like as a child in terms of your voice? Were you quite an outgoing child? Were you quite an introvert?
This is quite intriguing, I think, if I look at myself where I am now to where I was as a child. I suppose the first part of that answer is, as a kid, did I have a voice? And I would say probably not. There was my parents and myself and my younger brother. I've now got another brother as well, but mainly it was as a young kid with just the two of us. And we moved a lot around as families. We moved all around sort of England and Saudi Arabia, spent some time in the States as well. And I think that always moving around, you became quite insular because you might have made some friends and then, a couple of months later, then you've moved away. And I know that when we were moving, to Riyadh, is the fact I actually didn't go to school for about 18 months. So it was then just my mum and my brother and myself, whilst my dad was obviously in Riyadh. I found it very hard to have a voice, I guess.
When you were at school, did you have much access to creative arts? Were you very creative as a child at school?
In the UK, I would say no, not until I was sort of in the sixth form at school. But in Saudi, 100% different because of the heat. You went to school a lot earlier in the morning and you finished early in the afternoon as well. But what they did is, because a lot of the parents were working, is that they kept you in school for another maybe 3 to 4 hours, and you just did loads and loads of creative projects. So I did journalism, worked for the school newspaper, if I remember rightly, sort of short stories, some art, but also they were very much into you expressing yourself maybe in sport. So there was all kinds of different sports. We had a choice when my brother and I were there. We could either go to the international school or the American school, where we went to the international school. But in the American school, you can imagine just all the avenues, certainly in the sports side of things, that really opened you up. But as I say, it's odd when I look back at that, how Saudi, yes, lots of creativity, but in the UK, not until maybe the sixth form.
Were you much of a reader as a child?
So both my parents were real readers. My dad, who's no longer with us, he was really into crime, westerns. There used to be, I don't know if you know him, but there used to be a writer called Louis L'Amour, and he wrote literally, I think, thousands of western novels. And my mother was really into horror, into Stephen King. Now, personally, I wasn't into Stephen King per se, but I suppose it was their love of reading that did come down to myself and my now middle brother.
So you said Stephen King wasn't a particular hero of yours. Who were your literary heroes growing up?
Okay, so definitely in the horror world, it's Clive Barker. So Clive Barker, for those that don't know, was Hellraiser. It was originally a novella called The Hellbound Heart, which then became a film. Definitely Clive Barker, because I saw where we used to live in Kent at this time, there was a shop, video shop, I guess, DVDs and whatnot, that had a big poster of Pinhead in the window. And when I watched that film, I was like, okay, this is really intriguing. And it was through that film I came to understand that Clive wrote books. books, and I bought a load of his short stories and then his novels and whatnot. But I think also I really like Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle, which I know isn't horror, but I think when you're a creator, I think even if you have a speciality like horror is mine, I still think you should you should read all the different genres. One thing I will say about Stephen King is that I do respect him as a writer and as a creator, and there are 2 or 3 of his books. There's a great book, The Dark Half, or one of his novels, The Dark Half, which was made into a film. That's really, really cool. You think of his books like It, The Stand, that have made really great TV series.
Was it your journalism background that led you to think, well, I can actually start to be creative in terms of writing?
I was always writing. I remember my nan, she said to me as a really young kid, I can see that you will have a career in this. So I'm assuming that I always was writing something. When I was really getting involved in the French side of myself, if you like, there were lots of French poets that I was really getting into. And, I know it's a bit pretentious, but you start writing poetry and, that leads to one thing leads to another. But I think it wasn't really until I got to university that I then started writing I Don't Mind a Drink. And when I was at uni, I remember just really one night having a drink and going back to the halls of residence, and these words started appearing in my head. And that's how I started writing. It's almost something that wasn't planned. It was just something that just happened. Clive Barker, when people ask him about his writing, he always says that he believes that there's like a sea of words, sea of stories that exists above him, and he's got a tap in his head. And sometimes this tap drips, and then he might just get a word or 2 might come out, and then if he's able to turn that tap on more, then the stories start flowing.
So what was your first major piece of creative writing?
The first story I ever wrote was a story called Weird. Oddly enough, I wrote that first story and I noticed that the college magazine was looking for stories. So I subbed it to that, and over the next sort of 3 years, I think it was about 25, 26 stories I had published through the college mag. And then literally as I was leaving uni, a small publisher got in touch and said that they'd heard about some of the stories and they wanted me to put together a small collection, which was called The Burial. And that came out 9 months, maybe, no more than a year after leaving uni, which was very exciting. When the book came out and I sat by the door waiting for Hollywood to come knocking, it never did. And I ended up cleaning aeroplanes.
But even whilst cleaning these aeroplanes, you were still writing, you were still being creative.
Yeah. I mean, it was great because being commissioned to write a particular script, and it was commissioned a little while ago, and I couldn't really find my way into this particular story because it was the producers come to me and said, look, I've got this idea. Will you write a script for it? And it wasn't really working, and I've just sort of put it aside. However, I started thinking about some real life stories that happened to me when I was cleaning these aeroplanes, and this is now really gone into this current film. So that's really cool. I think when you're a creator, you always are creating, and you always have to create. So even for me, I've always got a little notebook, pad and pen, always writing. Even to the fact that sometimes when you're going out with people, phrases might appear in your head, or you might just see some inspiration. You might see somebody, and you just have to jot that down. So you've always got to be creating, I think.
You're writing books, you're writing stories. Mm-hmm. How do you then move to start to write screenplays, and how do you then start to transition in towards the film industry? How did that start off?
My journey, which is not going to be the same for everyone's, is that literally I was writing the books, writing stories, writing the books, but I realised that the written word wasn't enough. When you're writing a book, you are given as much information as you can for the reader to then create their own image of what you're telling them, right? So if you say, oh, there was a scary monster in the corner, that's great. My idea of what that scary monster is, and your interpretation of what my scary monster is, could be something that's completely different. You try and give as much information as you can, but it still might not be the same. So what I realized as I was creating is the fact that I actually wanted to be maybe a little bit more in control and get what was out of my head into a visual form, not just onto a written page. So So I started writing some short film scripts. We shot one. I did a rewrite of one actually when I was at uni, and we shot that, which has been lost to the annals of time somewhere. But then started doing it more seriously. There's an award that's part of the International Emmys, which is called the Sir Peter Ustinov Screenwriting Award, and I wrote something for that, and I didn't win it, but I came runner-up, which was really cool. And that proved to me, I think, that I did have a voice in the screenwriting world. But you see, what you then realise is that writing a story, writing a book is relatively cheap, right? Because all you need is, nowadays you can just type it straight onto a computer, or you can write it on a pad and paper. But if you want to make a film or TV series or something like that, even though nowadays, which we didn't really have we didn't have at all actually when I was a lot younger, is now you can do everything on a mobile phone. But at that time, it took money to get a camera, get lights and blah, blah. That's why what I did was, and I was actually in Cannes at the film festival when I got a call from a theatre in the UK and said, "Oh, Dean, we've heard about you. We are doing these nights of new work. Would you be interested in writing for the theatre?" And I was like, okay, that's intriguing. I've never done that before. I think, again, I'm going to say it's alcohol, but having a drink and this phone call coming and saying, all right, then let's do it. So I went back to UK, wrote a little play, put that on, and I really enjoyed it. It was only a sort of a monologue, really. One actor, she was performing. It was a medieval sort of horror piece called Zero that she presented, if you like, to the audience. And I really liked it because you had an instant reaction from the people that were there, right? So again, you write a book, and unless you're watching somebody who's reading that book, you're not going to see it, right? And the same with a film is that, yes, your actors or the crew might turn around and say, "Oh, Dean, this is a brilliant piece of work." Unless you're sitting in every cinema, you're just not going to get it. But with the theatre, it was instant. It was there. And I got that bug. So I was able to direct one of Clive Barker's plays, Frankenstein in Love, which we did in London. And that was really cool because for the first time, I was directing someone else's work. Clive's stipulation is that we weren't allowed to change a word. It was what is on the page is exactly how you're going to do it. That was quite intriguing, trying to give it a bit of Dean magic. Doing all the plays then got me back into being introduced to a lot of people. And they kept saying, "Dean, you've got to do films, you've got to go do films. You got to do films." So that's why I then moved back into doing films.
Quite nicely brings me on to my next question. When you actually write, how do you do it? Are you a modern person? Are you a computer person? Are you a pen and paper person? What's your style of actually putting your ideas down?
This is going to change for the mediums, right? So with the film scripts, I write them on a pad and pen all the time. I'll sit there, I'll write maybe 15, 20 pages, the A4 pads. So I do about 20 pages of those a day. I set a target for a screenplay of 120 pages. So that would take me, just over a week or whatever. And then I might do my second draft in another pad. And then as we go along, I start then typing it up onto the computer. For the short stories and that side of me, I do it straight into the computer. My mind seems to think really, really quick when I'm writing the stories. So I have to be there, but it's almost like I get taken over by something. So it has to be instant. It has to be instant that it's coming out, and there's no control over how long I'm going to be sitting there. I might sit there for 5 minutes and maybe do 1,000 words, or I might sit there for an hour and only do a few words, but I have to have this connection at all times with the laptop, with the keys. And also I may not know what I've written until sometime later. I'll go back and go, "Oh, right, I've written that, have I?" It is almost as if there's something else is controlling it.
You've done a lot of writing for the theatre, you've done writing for films. How do you then move from the writing to starting to direct, produce, starting to manage the films?
I would say that the majority of people who create their work want their work produced. So whether that's in a book or whether that's in a film or on a theatre. And you can't do that yourself You can write the book yourself, but you can't publish the book generally. I know you can do self-publishing nowadays, but back in my day, self-publishing, when I first started anyway, self-publishing wasn't around. So if you want to do stuff in a theatre and you want to do stuff in the film world, is the fact that you need somebody else to buy into your vision, maybe to pay for your vision, whatever it may be. And I think that as you get older and the more that you do, you realise that, I suppose, one of two things is, one, that there's not enough people with money to go round. Okay. And if you're going to do it in the theatre, very high risk, unless you've got a load of money yourself to keep putting on your plays, which is what we used to do. There comes a point where your money runs out. In the film world, there's so much money that it costs to make a film or whatever, that you sometimes get stuck in development hell. And this is what's happened to me over the years, and I know countless others, is the fact you have a producer, they read your script and says, "Oh, right, Dean, this is brilliant, let's make it." And you go, "Yeah, cool, okay, so can I have some money then?" "Well, we might be able to give you a couple of quid now, but you've got to wait for this." And you go, "Oh, right, okay." Then a year goes by, and it's like, "Okay, is this film ever going to get?" Yeah, don't worry, sign this bit of paper. And this could go on for a number of years, right? And you think, hang on a second, I was 20 when I started this. Now I'm not 20. Hang on. And this film still hasn't been made. So there comes a point where I believe that you have to throw your hat in the ring and you say, "I'm doing it." So certainly as I've got older and have had experiences with producers where I've said, "Hang on, this isn't right." I know I said this earlier, and I don't want to sound as if I'm this person, but you've got to take a bit of control, right? You've got to take a bit of control of your own work. And I've been in this situation as well, where maybe you've written a script, you've signed it over to the producer, the film or whatever is made, and you go, "Hang on a second, what's that? That's not what I wrote." You need to be a little bit more in control. And I think from a directing point of view, it just was a natural thing. For me, it was just natural, right? Is the fact that when you're writing and people are asking you about your work and you're doing all that, I know I do this a lot, moving my hands, and you're trying to tell the story visually, it just became a natural thing that you were directing as well. And the great thing I always found is that people were, "Oh, okay." There wasn't any sort of, "Oh, hang on a second, what right have you got to direct? What skills or whatever have you got?" It was just like, "Oh, okay." Film business is a no business. So you just keep giving them enough reasoning so that eventually that no has to become a yes.
One of the very famous quotes from early on in Alfred Hitchcock's career was that he said he directed the film in his mind completely before he even rolled the first reel of film. Are you a control freak, or are you quite versatile in terms of you'll change things as they need to go on?
I think is that if you go into a film and you are cast iron on this is the way it's going to be, and there's no changes, then you're a fool. You can definitely go into your project with a clear direction, because at the end of the day, it's not as if you haven't just turned up that first day to direct this film. You as a director might have done storyboards, lookbooks, all this stuff. You've gone and seen the location 100 times. You know where everything is, right? Everything. And then there in the camera's running, lights are on, you shout action, and the actor does something different. That's interesting, because that's not what we've agreed. So then you have to be very nimble and say, right, I'm great. The actor has come alive in this role, so let's go with it. Or do you want to go the other way and say, "Stop, everyone, stop"? They might have taken an hour to get that set up, right? That shot set up. And if you just turn around and say, "Right, stop," and you start throwing the proverbial toys out the pram, you got no chance, right? So for me, I think you can do all the prep, and it's right that you do all the prep, but anything can happen, and you have to be nimble. You have to think on your feet. Otherwise, there's no point of a director being there, because everyone just knows what they've got to do. Now, in the short film that I shot last year, The Devil in the Detail, what was really cool is the fact that we got some rehearsal time. So I was able to work with the actors, work with the camera team and the lighting team. And even on that rehearsal, everyone was suggesting little ideas. Now, those ideas could only be suggested because we got to that point. All of us had worked together to get to that point, but also that they felt comfortable enough that they could throw things out there. I'm not take everything on board, but there were some really cool things that came out of it when we actually shot the film. Again, especially Kevin McNally, very seasoned pro actor, things were happening, and he was saying, Dean, do you mind if I try this? And the great thing nowadays is that certainly when you're shooting digitally, is that you can do that. You can do that playing. And if an actor turns around and says, Dean, do you mind if I just do this? You go, cool, we'll do it your way, Kev. We'll then do it my way. And then when we look in the editing, you can turn around and say, okay, Kev was right, or no, it didn't quite work. Things that were really important in the written page worked in the written page and probably worked when the actor said it. But then when you get into the editing process, you go, hang on a second, let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. And you've still got a really cool film.
You talked about one of your latest films starring the wonderful Kevin McNally. Who are the other actors that you really love working with and the actors that you really value?
I was able to work with Dion Marcos. I've worked with him on 2 other projects. There was a feature film where I originally met him, say 4 years ago, which is sort of stuck in production limbo at the moment. Then I was first AD of a short film called Musketeer, and they were looking for, again, Kevin McNally was in that. So that's where I first met Kevin, and looking for a younger actor to play against Kevin. And I said, oh, look, I can really recommend Dion. It worked. And then when we were doing Devil, I was like, okay, I need an actor who can make something of it. Let's put it this way, right, without ruining the story. There's a dream within a dream. So there were certain things that had to be shot to Dion. He was like, okay, that's a really interesting way of doing this. Dion was great. And then we also in Devil had an actor I hadn't worked with before who was recommended to me by his agent at the time, a guy called Richard Carnaby. I tell you what I like to do, which is what I did in the theatre, where possible, was take actors from production to production. Actors that might not be household names, I get that, but they delivered every time. And when they knew I was writing something new, they were always on the phone going, Dean, please, we want to be in your films. We want to be on your films.
Fantastic. Let's come up to date. It's 2025.
Yep.
You are with the wonderful Sharon Axel, part of the dynamic duo running Drax Productions Limited, and 2 films now in the can. Do you want to talk about those quickly?
Yep. So Sharon and I, we met about, let's say 4 years ago, and we met on a particular project. It was a British project. Didn't know each other before that. Sharon was hired as a director and I was hired as a line producer. As I say, it was a British project. The guy that was the writer and he was the originator of the project, he had some development money and the film was cast. It was quite well developed and he didn't necessarily have a lot of experience. So to actually get where he got was really, really cool. So fair play to him. And as I say, Sharon and I then got involved and I had said to the team that, look, this story, though it's British, it's set on this strange island. And I think that we can't shoot that in the UK because we just haven't got those right locations. So why don't we consider shooting this in the south of France, where I did have a lot of contact. So using a friend of mine, a guy called Matt, who at the time was working for Film France and doing a lot of stuff with the Region Sud and the Marseille Film Commission, Sharon, myself and the other writer producer, we all went down to Marseille at the back end of COVID, right at the back end of COVID. And Matt took us around various locations in just outside Marseille in Provence. We went to Marseille Studios and it was an amazing trip. And with some bottles of rosé being drunk in the port of Marseille and the sun shining, I think it was Matt actually said to me, goes, Dean, does this place really remind you of Cannes? And I was like, yeah, but there's a different vibe down here than there is in Cannes. And I really like Marseille. So Sharon and I then really started talking about putting a production company together. It was one of those things that sort of just came out of, a quick conversation. And we were like, okay, so Sharon, what do you really like? And she was, I like sci-fi and your horror. And we were like, okay, so why don't we put together a sci-fi, genre film company, sci-fi and horror? And that's what we did. Drax was born very quickly. We were able to put a whole slate of perspective, movies together, which were all feature films. And we started putting business plans and all that together for the next sort of 5 years. We were able then to get some funding from Creative UK, I think they are nowadays because they've changed their names a couple of times, but also through Hertfordshire Council. And we were able to develop the business and start developing some of these movies. We've been going for about just 3 years. It's been challenging because the global issues that we all face, but yeah, we've been able to, because of the funding that we've and the finances, investment, etc., that we've brought in through the EIS scheme, I hasten to add, is that we've been able to shoot to date 2 short films. So the first one was Black Time, which I produced and Sharon wrote and directed, starring the brilliant Suzanne Kendall. It's a standalone short which could potentially be used as, I'm not going to use the word proof of concept, it's in the same universe, plays in the same universe as a feature film called Quantum Redemption. And then we were able to shoot, as I said, Devil in a Detail. Both of these films were officially released this year, 2025. We had a great screening in Soho, actually, in Dean Street, as coincidences would be. And that went down really, really well. So, yeah, and then what we've got at the moment is that we've put together what we're calling a horror mini slate, of which The Devil in the Detail was the first film. Then we've got the second film, which I got no problem saying because we've signed it off, the project off, which is called The Dead Next Door. And then we've got 2 feature films, which will then be following on. And there could be, because of some things that have happened over the last week or so, another project that is thrown into the mix on there as well, which is going to be something a little bit different. So yeah, I mean, with any film company, not so much genre, but with any film company, these are testing and challenging times. But I think it's Warren Buffett said that if you can get to 3 years with a business, then it's going to be a success. So we've done our 3 years. So I'm looking forward to the success.
Fantastic. So where can people see Black Time and Devil in the Detail at the moment?
Okay, so you can visit the websites and you've got the trailers and lots of information about the films. At this moment in time where we are in August, we're not allowed to the whole film's online because they're entered into a number of festivals. Okay, and we're talking to distributors and some potential streamers. So if they are, say we could stick them on YouTube, but then that would cause a problem for us later on. So at the moment, check out the website.
Fantastic. And so film festivals, you've got a few lined up for this year?
Well, we've entered both films into, I think it's about probably 40 to 50 festivals between the 2 of them. So we're really waiting to hear back, because the challenge you have sometimes is that we finished, say both films are officially ready as of, let's just say March. But some of the festivals that we've entered, we might not be hearing until November or December of this year. So that's why we're stuck in a bit of a limbo with them. And when we did the screening, the double screening, everyone really loved what they saw. And of course, yes, people come up to us going, Dean, we want to, we want to see it on the big screen again. We want to do this, we want to do that. And we can't. We're as frustrated as everyone else. But as soon as we can get them out there, we will. And again, because what you said there is a great pointer, is that when we hear about the festivals, we will also put all that information on the website and on our social media so people can see it. One thing I will throw out there is the fact I'm actually a judge for a film festival at the moment. And sometimes it's heartbreaking when you see films which are very, very good, but you can't accept them into the festival because there may be a clash with another film that's already been chosen, or it's just the general programming. So, we know that we're going to get knockbacks. Is that a slight on the film? No, it's not fitting, what the festival's about or whatever. So,
fantastic. You'll be sipping champagne at Cannes next year, will you? Hopefully with a couple of films in the contests?
For those that don't know me, right, which may be thousands of people, but Cannes is my place, right? Cannes is my place. And I've actually been writing a book about Cannes and about all the things that have happened to me over the many years that I've been going there. Oddly enough, right, is that the last 2 years, we actually haven't been to Cannes because it's clashed with pre-production of things that we've been on. So I never, ever thought, right, that I'd say that I'd miss a Cannes. So next year, which will be the 79th, if memory serves, we will be back. My plan is, which is part of my book, is that it may not be next year that we have anything, but it could, that's in the festival, but 80 is what we're aiming for. So we'll see. As I say, you can make the most amazing of films, but it won't get into the festival because of another reason. But we'll see. Cannes is great, and I'd say that anyone who has the opportunity of going to Cannes, especially for the film festival, go.
The website is draxproductions.com.
It is, and I suppose to be clear, Andy, for those that don't know, there is actually an energy company, I think, called Drax.
Yes.
So what you need to do is it's drax-productions.com.
So drax-productions.com as opposed to the bio-waste fuel power company.
And it's amazing how many of the emails land up in my inbox where they talk. You're reading something, you go, "Wow, this is a plot for a film. What is it?" And then you realise they've actually sent it to the wrong company.
Well, that's got to be worth a film, surely.
Definitely.
Mistaken identity. So drax-productions.com for the website. You can see the trailers on there. There's going to be a lot of exciting films coming up, and it's been a fascinating conversation, Dean. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Find Your Voice.
Thank you, Andy. Very much enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it. You can catch up on the previous 2 episodes on your favourite podcasting platform. We're taking a break next week as it's the bank holiday here in the UK, but we will have a new episode on September the 8th. I hope you can join me then. For now, I'm Andy Hesse. Thank you very much for finding your voice.